And wonderful surprise, I have Susan Critton with me, who is our trainer for the Certified Personal Brand Strategist. But Susan, you've also been going through your own studies and recently on the topic of purpose, right?
I have. It's been very fun.
Yeah, so she's going to share some of what she's learning with us today. And then we always are updating the materials of the personal branding class. So she's also going to share some of the information that we will probably be updating the class with even before we go live in just a week so that we can always be fresh and recent. But before we talk about purpose, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the skills. And Susan, I don't know if you've seen this. I've shared it in our newsletter a couple of times, but I always love research, as you know. And I came across these skills research from McKinsey.
Mhm.
And what they did is they looked at these skills to see what skills are going to be most important for people in the future. Let me
Mhm.
see if I can make that a little bit bigger and then fit it on the screen still. We'll see.
Great.
Yeah. So what they looked at, and they're called DELs, which is something about talents. I can't remember what the acronym stands for right now,
Mhm.
but it's like detailed talents. And so it's interesting that, of course, adaptability and coping with uncertainty are big for people to be able to move from one job to the next. That wasn't too surprising. Then the achievement orientation, fostering inclusiveness, and then energy, passion, and optimism. And so I found that interesting. I mean, even those are above digital collaboration and
Mhm.
smart systems. So understanding own strengths, having energy, fostering inclusiveness, and then of course these adaptability and coping with uncertainty up here at the top.
Mhm.
And just to look at, how do we help people build those skills? How do we help people understand who they are? I know that we've talked a lot about fostering inclusiveness really hinges on how comfortable you are with yourself, right?
Right. And I found that interesting. There was a piece in kind of this purpose at work course I was just doing on talking about aging belongs to the body, purpose belongs to the spirit. And so even for people who are worried about any ageism, which I think goes into the inclusiveness, but mostly the energy, passion, and optimism piece is that, purpose is spirit oriented and that doesn't matter how old you are. Really, it's that place about what's my enthusiasm for doing things. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of the intersection there of purpose and passion, because
Mhm.
when you feel purposeful, you're probably passionate, right? They go hand in hand, I would imagine, most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So then they also looked at, I mean, that's employment. And then I thought this was interesting. So they have a little triangle of employment, high income, and job satisfaction, and kind of the skills that go along with those. And under high income, you see confidence, being able to develop work plans, right? Having a
Mhm.
plan for your work,
Mhm.
and then organizational awareness. So being organizationally savvy. And then under job satisfaction, also self confidence, coping with uncertainty, and then self motivation and wellness.
Mhm.
And so just looking at the overlaps there, especially with confidence. I know I've been talking about confidence for a long time, but this kind of motivated me to even dig deeper on some ways that we can help coaches get tools to help people with their confidence. Because 2 out of 3 of these little arms, confidence is the number one.
Well, and I often will coach people on this idea of, let's say they've taken a year off, which during COVID, there were a lot of people that took a year off, right?
Right?
Is that I will say to them what I have found over and over with my clients is that it's not even the what you did during that year, it's how you tell the story. And so if
Mm.
you tell it in a very confident way about this is just what I did, most people go, "Hey, that's cool." But if you're apologetic about it or, "Oh, gee, I was gone, I was out of the workforce for a year," it's like red flag, red flag, red flag. But it's really in that confidence of how you tell that story, I think.
Well, and the knowing your audience and connecting the dots so
Mhm.
that when you tell that story, you've got confidence, but it's built on real. I don't think you can
Exactly.
have confidence if you're blowing smoke, right?
Exactly, exactly, but
It's
if
gotta
you're,
be
like,
connective.
if they took care of somebody, I've had somebody took care of their elderly parent, and it's like, so tell that story, right? If there are people that don't like that you ever do anything like that's probably not the right place for you. And it's not like you tell the story a lot. You just mention it, you go on, and you say it with this confidence of what you're doing. So you're
Yeah,
welcome,
I
I got
like that.
big.
Hi, sorry, I didn't realize that it had made you little. Screen screen issues here. If you're joining us, feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from and what your thoughts are on purpose and passion. And so, Susan, you know that I also found these articles from McKinsey, and these ones are a little bit older, but they were from after we taught the class last time. So we'll
Mhm,
have to work them in there. Um, and this one is talking about how people can be more purposeful, and it had this little kind of definition of purpose in these 9 little squares. And so, oh boy, that got big fast. Let me get down here. There we go. So it had the 4 main ones of agency, kind of others, self, and integration.
mhm.
And I thought this was interesting. Had you ever seen that before?
No, I thought that was really interesting too, and I think too, even the word agency, I realize that, like, sometimes we have our career speak, and those of us who have had counseling know what agency is, but for a lot of people, they don't really understand that that just means your own personal kind of involvement in it, right? Isn't
Mm,
that it's that your ownership of that piece of your own involvement in it, your capacity to do it. Right.
yeah, that you're kind of in charge, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word, right? You
Yeah,
get to choose.
yeah, and I think that we sometimes we speak in terms that not everybody uses, and that's one of them. That was one of the things I thought about in looking at their block, but I thought that was really interesting. Then they go on in that article to talk about somebody whose primary function is freedom. How does an employer deal? Here we go. How does somebody deal with the free spirit?
I
That's it.
think we both fit. I didn't really love any of these 3, but I think I fit probably the most in the free spirit. So I was
Mhm,
just toggling. Let me grab this link here and I'll put it in the chat. But I was toggling between these, and I thought that's really interesting just to think about what is most important to you and your clients. And this really gets to that
mhm,
values
mhm,
piece, right?
mhm.
Um, with
Well,
that value
not just,
piece.
I agree. I think it's values, but it's also your innate characteristics.
Mm.
So I had a potential client today, and she was talking about, I love that you give homework, and I said, oh, you must be, high on achiever on your strengths finder. She, ha ha ha, yes, I am. I said achievers always love homework because then they feel like check, they accomplished something that it was worth paying for.
Yeah. Hi, Anna. We've got Jackie saying hello from Maryland. The confidence of telling your story. Yeah. Yep. Being in charge.
Mhm,
And Jim, emotional side of careers and not just the strategic. Well, and I think that's what I took from that first graphic we were showing about the McKinsey skills
mhm.
is that there is some strategy there, but the number 1 and number 2 skills for employability, being adaptability and coping with uncertainty, those are both very, I mean, yes, you have to also be strategic, but you have to be able to deal with the mind games
Right.
that come along because no matter how great your strategy is, if you can't stay mentally tough, if you will, then you aren't going to be able to implement it when you have to deal with those changes.
Well, and I know one of the things we are going to talk about is, purpose and personal branding. And I would say one of the big shifts that, is it all right if I kind of move in that direction for a second?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that I feel like one of the big shifts with personal branding, certainly in the time that we've been doing this, is that there is a process and a strategy to it. I mean, we are strategists when we finish that program, but I have gotten more and more focused on all the pieces that it makes up who a person is, and those pieces become your personal brand. And if you really understand those, you can be adaptable. You can say, which pieces of myself do I want to have show up a little bit more, all while being consistent with your personal brand. And so with the idea of purpose, to me, purpose is one of those pieces that we look at in a personal brand. And it's and here's another piece I've been playing more and more with too, is that what does it look like in present time? Because so many of us, I think, in the career field look at what's your experience, where have you come from, and yes, of course, where are you going? But often people don't stop in the, I mean, it's what mindfulness is all about, right? It said, how do you stay in the present moment? And in this present moment of who you are, what does that look like in the world of work? And then how do you put the strategy together to do that? And it's very much the emotional piece. It's very much the core of the our humanness.
Yeah, and I think that's one of with adaptability, you are more adaptable when you're really rooted in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people say, well, if I'm adaptable, then I'm kind of that chameleon. And it's like, well, maybe, but you're really able to adapt because, as you said, you're so confident in who you are that you
Mm-hmm.
can say, okay, here are the pieces that I can pull and put together and still be confident,
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm making this change versus someone who's maybe not that confident in who they are overall. Then when they have to change, they change too much, right? They almost
Right.
like throw out everything and try to start over, which doesn't work.
So I actually have a great quote for that. There's a theologian named Richard Rohr, and he's written 30 books or something. He's an old man now. And he says, when you don't have your true self, you take on everybody else's false self. And that
Mm,
so is in alignment with what you just said, because, and the idea of personal branding, really, right, is that if you know yourself well, you can say, I'm really good at these pieces. I don't really know much about this, but I'll either figure it out or I'll find somebody who can do it instead of pretending all the time. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just feeling overwhelmed or feeling like yeah, I gotta start over and being frustrated, which is
Mhm.
what I see a lot of people in career change. They kinda wanna throw everything out and start over, but
Mhm.
then they're frustrated that they have to start over.
Right. Or that no one's responding to them. And I think
Right.
that it's, when no one's really responding to them, it's because they really are sending out such a mixed message because they aren't very clear about who they are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hi, Valerie. Hi, Cheryl. Good to see you. We just had a person yesterday on our clubhouse room that was talking about he'd been out of IT for 5 years and wanted to go back into
Mhm.
it. And it's kind of that same piece of you've got to really own that identity and be able to fit in what have you been doing for the last 5 years
Mhm.
into that identity without confusing people
Right.
and finding that grounding.
And I think the adaptability there is that, that they need to catch up, right? So they still have the skill set, or they wouldn't have probably been in that kind of work anyway, but they might be behind. And so they have to be willing to maybe take a lesser position than they would have, or something where it's a little bit more instructive. Yeah.
Well, and to your point earlier, to have confidence in telling that story, but also to be able to put the story together in a way that makes sense to the audience and doesn't leave them feeling like you're unfocused or don't know where you're going or where you've been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
the pieces too, and this I think ties into confidence and knowing who you are, is this idea, and this was kind of what came up in some of the studies I've been doing, is this idea of what's called purpose anxiety. And I think this could actually go into all the things we're talking about, which is that place about, is there something wrong with me because I don't have like some big major purpose? Or
Right.
but I think some of that is in doing your own work, you start to look at purpose with a small p, like the day-to-day purpose things, and pretty soon you're asking bigger questions, you're following that thread, and it becomes more obvious in that. I know that, sorry, that was a little departure from what you were talking about, but
No, it's perfect. And then, I always talk about purpose being a verb and not a noun.
right.
So it's not something that you go looking for, but it's something that you create and you bring because you
Mhm.
find how is what I'm doing today adding purpose to what I want to do long term or whatever it might be. And so it's so funny. This fits perfectly with what you were just saying. So
Mhm,
this is also
mhm,
from the McKinsey
mhm,
that we have multiple layers of purpose,
mhm.
right?
And there was,
It isn't just
a
work.
piece too is that, our purpose is always being suggested by life, right? So when you look at
Mm,
these three different circles, there may be times where the purpose of the organization really takes on a strong hold for you, or the actual work you're doing, or maybe it's the volunteer things you do on the outside, or the causes that you care about there. And, and it's so much of it too is just actually purpose is a constant question of how am I
mm.
engaged with life? How am I part of that? And I think a lot of times, again, I see people looking for something to have this concrete purpose from the outside, that they are looking for the noun version of it, speaking, of your verb version of it. And it's really your own curiosity, it's your own questions that you're asking, and how do you follow that thread in your life to find purpose in those things that you're doing.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it comes kind of back to that agency, right? That you have agency over purpose. It's not
Mhm.
something that you wait for someone else to give to you, and that it changes
Right, it's
is
not a
kind of what you
static
were
to your
saying. Yeah.
adaptability piece. It should always be evolving, much like your personal brand. There is the core of who you are, but it needs to constantly be updated, right? Rebooted, get a new program update or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that helps people feel like we always wanna be evolving in some way, that,
Mhm.
nobody really wants to stay in the same place, do the same thing, be the same person. I don't know, learning and growing, obviously, those 2 things go together because you are the same person, but you're evolving at the same time.
Right. And there may be pieces that, it was interesting too. Dan Pink, you know who he is, of course.
Yeah.
And he's come out with a new book. I'm not even sure if it's quite out yet, but it's coming out. It's called Regrets. And
Mm,
this is it. He kind of comes at it from another angle, which is that when you think about regrets, they're often things you cared about that you didn't do, that you didn't follow through with. And so, even as we talk about personal branding and passions and purpose and these different things, it's that if you are being adaptable and following purposes as they're suggested in life, the idea is that in 10 years, if you were to look back, like if you were to add 10 years to your where you are now, look back and say, what would I have regretted that I didn't do 10 years ago? I mean, because certainly we have all things that, hopefully we don't have a lot of regrets. But he was talking about, if you think about your regret things from the idea of an angle of regret, you'll live your life more fully.
yeah, well, and I'm a big fan of, The Positive Intelligence by Shirzad
Yeah.
Suramin, and he talks about that as being one of the sage powers
Hmm.
of doing that future. I don't remember what he calls it exactly, but putting yourself in the future,
Hmm.
what would I want to have done in this situation when I look back on my life?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, right, and that question, of purpose is like the ultimate question is, if I didn't exist, how would the world be different? Now that starts to get purpose with a big P.
Right. Yeah, and I love your purpose anxiety, and I think people get passion anxiety, right? I don't know what my
Mhm,
passion is. It's like, well, that evolves, and a lot of times we become passionate about
mhm,
something we don't necessarily know
mhm,
we're passionate about. I mean, I had no idea that I was passionate about career work until I
mhm,
started doing it,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And probably many of us would say that because it's not something you grow up thinking you're going to do for a job. So someone, I don't know, unfortunately, who this is, but
Uh-huh.
remind job seekers that we've all been designed with inherent gifts and talents. Purpose is found between the things we care about most and the things we dislike or can't stand.
Mhm,
Interesting.
mhm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, usually when you're upset about something, it's a huge value has been crossed, right?
Mm, right.
That's one of the ways I always look at as a marker when I get mad about something. I go, okay, well, what value of mine was just crossed?
Yes. And Renee is saying that you may become stagnant for a time and realize that you took that place that was chasing the wrong dream and not the one that
Mhm.
elaborates who you are.
Mm.
That lets you grow. I like that. And then Valerie
Yeah.
says, purpose
And
evolves, how it aligns with goals. Yeah, you were saying that before that you're if you and I know a lot of times people don't think about goals as being part of their brand, but they most
mhm.
definitely are.
Well, and I love the statement that William came up with is that goals give your brand direction. So you have this brand. I mean, if you think about it, here I am, here's my brand. It's like, well, do I go this way or do I go that way or which way do I go with it? And in theory, you show up as a congruent human being no matter what you're doing. So so I am laughing. I have a quick story about this. So my husband recently retired, and he, and that's always a really interesting time. He's been a corporate lawyer. He's had, ran a law firm, like big jobs, and he's now home. But I knew he wouldn't sit still for long. So one day he says, I always love working at the pool. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, and then he says they have a shortage of lifeguards. And I'm like, okay. Next thing I know, he's gone online. He's gotten his lifeguard recertification and he's working at the pool as a lifeguard with all the, 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds. And but my point on that is that he found that purpose and he's still who he is. He's actually doing the job in much the same way he did as a lawyer, but with obviously a whole different skill set.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah. And so
Way to go,
way
Rand.
to go, Rand. Yes. And now he's gonna, I think, run the new league for kids at the elementary school.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
the
you're right.
idea of your brand is that he's still committed to the people he serves. He does it in a way that's really ethical and shows up on time, and all those pieces are his brand. He just not doing it as a lawyer. He's doing it as a local lifeguard.
Yeah, and they're so lucky to have him.
They
That's
are.
so yeah. Oh my goodness. I can see if I was a lifeguard that he would be just a joy to have around.
he
Just
he's
bring that different perspective.
Yeah.
That's what I
He
did
says
growing up.
he did say the girls have much smaller bikinis than he remembers. Makes him nervous.
That's funny.
Says I just try and
Oh.
have a big hat on and avert my eyes. Sorry that we got way off topic.
But you're so right that we still show up as who we are and that a different definition of purpose, that he's found a new way to enact that.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you saw there's some big I have been a little bit distracted with our move, but I did see that there's a big poof online about Malcolm Gladwell's recent comments about that everybody should go back to the office, because you can't find purpose or community if you aren't in an office. And what we're talking about here just talks to how everybody's going to do that differently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Some people need that
Right.
office.
Right. So some people really need that to feel connected and other people don't. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, just from a community standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I do believe is that we all need community.
Mhm.
Now, how you define that and how you create it is very individual to to everybody. I think part of what our clients are looking for right now is that community. What is that going to
Mhm.
look like for me? And getting a new job, will that help me build better community? Maybe I don't feel like I've had a good community where I'm at right now, virtual or in person. I don't
Mhm.
think I don't think you automatically have community because you're in person, right?
Well, and okay, I'm going to give you an example of just being creative and doing something like that. So we live on the corner, and so people walk by our house to get to the local trail. So we put a sign, and I said, we all say hello, but nobody really knows each other. So we put a sign out front on a whiteboard that we had that said, "We love that you walk by, but come by on Friday night at 5 o'clock for a glass of wine." And we thought, we'll see if anyone shows up. We had 14 people that we didn't know that kind of came in and out, like they came for an hour, left for an hour, after an hour. And um, it was really interesting. Two people were great business contacts, like randomly, just people wandering up. And so I think part of that idea of purpose is I'm a connector, that's a core of who I am. So that was just a nice way. I had no intention of anything. Turned out one of them is an employment lawyer, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I could really use somebody like you. I don't know what to do with some of these people." And he's like, "Can we be in touch?" And it was really interesting. But back to the idea of community, is like we're trying to even create that in our neighborhood, and it could turn into to a stream of business, which was not intended at all.
Yeah, you're such a good connector, Susan. I love that
And
about
we
you.
really had fun, and we had our little granddaughter there, and she was the life of the party, and so it was very fun.
Yeah, Jackie says, "What a great idea, Susan."
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it was really fun, and I got name tags, and because we didn't know anybody's name, and anyway, it was really fun.
yeah. Well, I just wanna give a little sneak peek of the, workbook here that we have created for our personal branding strategist, because the personal branding strategist is an opportunity to learn about how you can help your clients, while you're also learning about yourself. So let me see if I can get the comment off there. All right. And then, this is just one of the many worksheets here that we have. Let me see if I can get back to it.
And, you
Yeah,
have done
make it
really a
bigger.
beautiful job of putting this together, because it was very much in need of an upgrade. And I love the way you've colorized it. I love, you've taken the core material, but you've just modernized it and done a really nice job.
Yay, we've been having so much fun. So we talk about the 5 different types of values, and we've got little values checklists for people in those.
Hmm.
And then Susan, we know we always start with what's your one word,
Hmm.
so that people can really distill down how they would define themselves. And then if I don't have this live right here, but you can click through the different tabs on the right, and one of the other areas we were talking about was knowing one's strengths. That was high up in the McKinsey skills. So we've got a whole section on strengths and ways that you can help your clients identify their strengths, obviously, with coaching questions, unearthing their fascinations. So if you are a strategist and you haven't
Hmm.
seen this yet, pay attention to your email, because we're going to be sending you the place where you can go in and download it. And if you haven't joined us for the strategist program and you're curious, let me know, and we'd be happy to set up a time to chat further with you about the program. So it's really an opportunity to clarify your brand. People always get so much out of it for themselves, but then to walk away with these tools that help your clients really get the foundation in these areas of who they are, so that they can build that foundation.
And I again, I've been pretty busy lately, surprisingly busy I thought, really, for summer. And I really use this process as my baseline process that I use on everyone. And then, of course, it's very individualized for the person within what we use, which pieces. But it is such a great foundation, and I really love it. Like, I just over and over, I'm really grateful to have this process as a foundation for the coaching I do.
Right, because then they can go through and do some of that work, and then you can take it deeper in your sessions. And I know you work with a lot of kind of mid-level and executive clients
Mhm.
who are making moves that feel so big, right? Because they're usually giving up a big job. Yeah.
Right. And so they really need to be able to have the conversation, especially to like everybody. But say somebody who's doing even a big career change where they're going into a different industry, I would say, really people just stumble so much on what are they going to say about who they are and what they have to offer. And um, yeah, and so that's a big piece. And I was saying to somebody today as an information call, and I said, people often want to skip right to the place about how do I message who I am.
Mm,
And I said, it never works. You can't skip that part about who you are, because you can never message in an honest way.
mm. Yeah, I love this. So I'm just gonna pop this up here. Murray says community is a verb, just like we were talking about purpose being a verb.
Mhm,
Yeah, you've gotta create it. I love that, Murray. And for our clients to help them figure out what does that look like for them,
mhm,
and how do you build it in a way that works for you? Yay.
right.
All right. Yay. Well, so we start the personal branding class next Tuesday, Susan,
No, 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Oh, 2 weeks. Yay, look
Yeah,
at that.
the
So if you're
23rd.
interested
It's like,
23rd.
wait.
Yeah. If you're interested, you have plenty of time to reach out, and Susan and I would be happy to share with you about the program. We've already got a fun group from Canada, the US, and Brazil that is forming, so we're gonna have a great class. Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your thoughts on
My
purpose.
pleasure,
This has
yeah,
been fun.
very good.
Thank you,
Thanks, Maria.
everyone. Have a great day.